Welcome to getting to know your congressional candidate, John Driscoll, a little bit better. John is running for congressman for the House District Number 2, which generalizes the eastern part of Montana from the Continental Divide. But more specifically, well, they just changed this district in our last legislative session. It would include Helena, Townsend, Great Falls, Choteau, Augusta, Shelby, White Sulphur Springs, Livingston, Gardner, Miles City, Billings, and points east from there. Now, John is a fifth-generation Montanan. He's been married twice, once for 21 years and presently to Catherine for 30 years and counting. He has 4 children, 6 grandchildren, 4 girls, 6 boys. He is an author of 3 books written on the Montana militia, Battle of the Bulge, and a 3rd book kind of combining those two as he toured around the state introducing people to the Battle of the Bulge. He researched the first use of electricity in Montana for the power company, which was the telegraph, and he rather enjoys history and researching it. He's very active in his military life, was culminating working for the Joint Chiefs of Staff and was in the Pentagon in 9/11. We kind of went over a lot of this stuff in our first show. This show we're focusing on issues. He was honorably discharged 5 times, was a smoke jumper firefighter twice, and he's still very active in promoting and advocating for firefighting, which we'll be discussing more shortly. Politically, he was elected to the Montana legislature for 3 terms out of Ravalli County, Hamilton, was a majority leader and Speaker of the House. He was then elected to the Montana Public Service Commission for 12 years. He has attended MIT and Harvard by their request and under scholarships, and has extensive military training starting with ROTC. John, welcome to the show. Welcome to you.
Thanks.
Well, let's start out with is that you're doing something pretty unique with your campaign, is that you're not accepting any donations. And several times you've run and you haven't accepted donations. That's pretty unique. Well, why is that?
Well, this time, it's a product of years of experience. The only way to do this properly is to not accept any donations and not seek any. Mm-hmm. And the reason that I'm doing it is I think that money in campaigns is one of the root problems we have in our country. I know our Supreme Court said it's free speech, money's free speech, but that doesn't ring true with me. Mm-hmm. What's happened is it's become a monster, really. Mm-hmm. I used to be able to track where money came from for different candidates. Now it's just a wash. And what the effect of it is it causes really good legislators that are trying to do the job to spend an inordinate amount of time raising money, and then it causes really bad public officials to try to exchange access to the White House or to some set of policies in return for money, which is really bad. And I think the source of a lot of the disruptions we've seen in the House of Representatives, particularly, is because people are trying to show off for people that got money. Mm-hmm. And so to my mind, it's way over the top. And so the only way you can deal with that, you can talk about laws or constitutional amendments, is get elected without taking any money. And mm-hmm. then people are going to say, wait a minute, maybe there's a different way to do this. That's mm-hmm. my thinking. And I believe it's possible. The federal statutes don't require me to report any campaign contributions. I won't have any until I've spent $5,000 of my own money. Mm-hmm. And I checking today, I've only spent $1,070, mm-hmm. and then plus the filing fee, it leaves me about $700 a month for this last 3 months before the election to mm-hmm. pay for gas. And so I'm using the money I have to get out and meet people on Main Street and all over the district. And we'll see what happens.
Yeah, and I know in our conversations you're talking about walking the streets in all these different towns, and you're meeting individuals. I mean, really, on the street stuff, yeah. Knocking on doors, and that's wonderful. I mean, imagine some of our congressional representatives now doing that.
Well, it gets you in some pretty hot conversations. The Eastern District has in the primary 40,000 voted for the 4 Democrat candidates, mm-hmm. and 100,000 voted for the 9 Republican candidates. So that means somehow 30,000 of the ones that voted for the Republicans have to see the light, become enlightened, become open-minded, and vote for me, mm-hmm. right? And the chances of that are pretty slim, but I'm worth trying it.
Well, one way to do that is to talk the issues, and
Yeah.
that's what this show is about. We'll talk about issues that are important to you so the viewer can watch and say, I agree or I disagree. And if they agree, you're the person for them. Well, in our previous show, we talked about your extensive military service. You're honorably discharged 5 times. How many people can say that? But let's talk about nuclear weapons. It's a big issue, and there's a lot of saber rattling that's going on with Russia and Ukraine, and nuclear weapons are always kind of in the background. Nobody's really talking about it. What's your position on that?
Well, the thing for people to remember is the only person who can speak for the people of the eastern Montana district is their congressman. Mm-hmm. And so what happens to those people in that district is really on the congressman. Mm-hmm. And so I feel that responsibility seriously. And what's happened the first 65 years since the Cuban Missile Crisis, the weapons, the Air Force people that have manned those weapons have really helped stabilize the nuclear warfighting world. But just more recently with Vladimir Putin, he's ignoring the strategic arms reduction talks that President Obama negotiated with him, and then we have violated the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty. So there's no treaties. There's some of the treaties that have lent stability are no longer there, mm-hmm. and we're in a hot war where we got somebody who's on the other side that even people who study Putin can't read what he's going to do, and that's very dangerous when you can't communicate. And so we have this chance of a first strike on our nuclear arsenal. Well, that's what the weapons in Montana are for. They're to attract the first strike and try to get off a launch, on 10-minute warning. But basically, they're a sponge. So the question we have to ask ourselves is: are we ready to have that happen? And like in that book, The Turner Diaries, that the right wing used to sell and still do here in Montana, they say we're in the zone of illusion. Well, I'm not in the zone of illusion. Mm-hmm. I've been in the Pentagon when we were struck, and I know how. I remember thinking, it took me quite a long time to get control of that experience. But if that had been a nuclear weapon, all of our built environment in Washington, the Washington Monument, the Arlington Cemetery, Lincoln Memorial, all of that, Jefferson Memorial would have been glass. Mm-hmm. And that could easily happen just with the push of a button. And certainly over here in Montana, at least a couple of warheads per silo would come in on us. And we need to really think about that. And my family doesn't want me to scare people, but I consider it my responsibility. We need to think about it. And lately, there's been an effort to modernize our nuclear weapons to the Sentinel system, it'll be an increased budgetary cost to the Air Force of $130 billion, plus $20 billion for more and more modern warheads. But because they're so far over budget, the Defense Department has suddenly quieted that down. And I'm hopeful that they're sitting there during this 2-year period rethinking what we're doing here, because the missiles that would come in on us are much more agile. They're hyperglide. They move fast. You can't predict where they're going to be coming through the atmosphere, and without even the guy with the bad haircut in North Korea or the Chinese, without even those being added to the arsenal on the other side, Putin's got more than enough to target and take out all of our nuclear, our sponge, mm-hmm. and then hit our main targets. So all I'm saying on this right now is the strategy we had is not working, or is not appropriate anymore. And so we need to rethink that. And if the Defense Department and the leaders of our country, whoever gets elected, decide they want to keep doing what we're doing, then I think we need to have fire behavior models for Great Falls and for Points East, so people know where they need to go in case this thing goes south. Mm-hmm. You can get an app on the internet. Just put it on your cell phone. It's called Blast Sim, and you can go to the closest silo and put a 1 kiloton warhead on that. It'll tell you the blast radius, you know, the fireball, and you can figure out if you're going to survive, how you're going to get your wife and kids and yourself around that place. And then are you going to go up or down the interstate? I mean, what's going to happen? In winter or summer, what's going to happen? And that's just basic common sense, and that we learned from Man Gulch. You know, have a fire behavior model and react accordingly. And if it turns out that it's not a good idea anymore, then I really would be an advocate of trading our land, the land-based leg of our triad. We have bombers and we have submarines, but the land-based, that's our missiles, for some kind of a big multinational long-term nuclear reduction treaty. And so that's just so people know that's where I'm coming from, and I'm coming from it from the point of view of somebody who representing the district, because the whole district's downwind from the targets. So if people aren't thinking about that, they should be.
It should be. That's something that a lot of people don't understand, that, you know, we are targets, and eastern Montana is a well, sacrificial, I guess, almost. You know, that goes that way. But now, you know, you worked with the PSC for 12 years, and we're talking electricity, and, you know, there's a lot of topics presently about coal strip, but what does the future hold? The future really needs a lot of electricity to keep everybody happy and with the devices we need. What's the future demand for electricity? How are we going to meet it?
Well, the basic economics of electricity are that what the plant is that you need at the margin, the newest one. If it's more expensive, your electricity prices are going to go up. Well, they're all more expensive. I mean, wind and solar, they're not so much so, but they need to be firmed up, and that's what that plant is down in Laurel. It firms up the wind. I just took a tour through that. That's a pretty cool plant. You know, they got 18 motors lined up. They can turn them on in a few minutes' notice, and when the wind goes down, they can pick it up. So that's one way to do it. I can't tell you the exact expense of that, but I'm sure it's pricey. And then I toured the Yellowtail Dam, because those 4 turbines in the Yellowtail Dam that the Bureau of Rec runs, they follow the load instantaneously. So if irrigation goes up or down, then they can follow that. Okay, that's where we're at right now. And then just recently, 3,000 megawatt high voltage direct current line has been funded to go from Colstrip over to South Dakota to start moving power farther to the Midwest. And so we can move excess power we have, say, in California over where we need it in the Midwest. All that's going on. But with that in the background, I think that Northwest Energy, I went over there, I went to door to door, I went and talked to the people in Colstrip. It looks like they're going to play out that plant. That coal plant's probably going to run for a while, because electricity is suddenly becoming so much in demand. And so it's going to be like an old car that everybody needs. I think that, you can take it to Antique Roadshow, it's not a very efficient plant, but I think that's what's going to happen. And meanwhile, I think Northwest Energy is planning to have a modular nuclear reactor, one of the small ones like the one in Kimmerer, Wyoming. They want to put it over in Colstrip to take advantage of the transmission lines by, I think, 2042. So I've been able to pick all that up. But when I see Bitcoin miners that use up an enormous amount of electricity for their good idea about how the currency system should be, when I see what used to be optional air conditioning now become mandatory because it's so hot in the summertime, and then you see the AI people saying that they need a 25% increase in the base load of electricity. We have 1,600 megawatts in Montana just on Northwest Energy. That means another 400 megawatts. That's a lot of electricity. That's many more plants. And so at the same time, we still haven't dealt with climate change. And in my mind, when I was on the Electric Power Research Institute Advisory Board, and back in the late 80s, we got the briefings from the National Academies of Sciences that the global warming, it was called then, is a real thing. And we started taking action, or they did. I was just kind of a strap hanger, but the people that really do stuff started, making sure the most efficient technologies went to China from American vendors. And then that's when we had 1,400 coal plants in our national fleet. Now we're down to 216. And 2 years from now, we'll be down to 108. And then after that, it'll drop by 30% over the next till 2030. So coal plants are going away. And I sat through a meeting at the Burlington Northern Santa Fe in Laurel, where the chief executive officer came up and said their shipments of coal on the railroads has gone from 300 million tons a quarter down to 149 million, and they're expecting it to go to tank. They call it a structural change. So coal is going away, whether people want to admit it or not, it is, and for good reason. It's unfortunate, but that's what's going on. But the railroad also, it generates a lot of carbon because it uses so much diesel. And the reason they can use diesel is that they get an automatic pass-through on their diesel costs. And when diesel goes up, the grain shipper gets to pay the price. Well, I went and looked at the numbers that the Burlington Northern Santa Fe submitted to the Surface Transportation Board this past quarter. I've got those numbers because they're required by law to do that so they can get their money, from their customers. And then I talked to an old-time railroader who told me that he thinks that about 20% of Burlington Northern Santa Fe's railroad operations are in the Montana department, which goes clear out to Mulbridge, South Dakota, and over to the Washington state line. Huge district. About 20% of their rail operations are in there. Well, if you use those two numbers and artificial intelligence, right? I'm using it. It looks like we would need about 3, maybe 3.25 small modular nuclear reactors to electrify the railroad. And the way that, and I would like to work on that with the railroad. I don't want to penalize them. I just want to help them make the change because the railroad needs to become way more efficient. And it's trying really hard. But while this is going on in the trucking industry, they're moving over to hydrogen-fueled trucks. Not just that, but autonomously driven trucks, which will drive not just their fuel costs down, but their operational costs. And that will really, really be some tough competition for the railroads. And we want to keep the railroad. So that's of interest to me. And then the other thing is, in Billings, the economy down there, I mean, they do, Great Falls has a small refinery. Billings and Great Falls do 220,000 barrels of refining of oil every day, which is a huge amount of oil. And so my thinking is that I want to go to the Petroleum Association meetings. I want to visit refineries. This already scheduled to learn what their plan is to adapt. If their plan is it's not a problem, I can't agree with that. It is a big problem. But if I can help them adapt, I'll do that. But one of the adaptations I'm most interested in is bringing seawater in from the Puget Sound using some of the repurposed tankers and then turning that seawater using electrolysis into green hydrogen for the passenger rail through Montana if they don't come up with it themselves, for the trucks that'll be using it and so forth. So those are all big changes, and over a 2-year period for the next congressional term, you just get started on it. But that's the picture that I'm working with in my mind. And I mean, we need basic things like we need hydrogen engineers coming out of the School of Mines in Butte instead of just petroleum engineers to tell us this plant is safe, it's going to work, and so forth. We need people that can handle the hydrogen coming out of some of the community college, and I know at Dawson Community College they're working in that direction right now because the southern passenger route is talking about hydrogen batteries, and between Chicago and Seattle, the halfway point is Glendive, and so they're thinking, well, they want to get people to know how to do that. That's good thinking. That's where I come from, and so those are the kind of things that and the other thing is nuclear waste. I told during the primary, no surprises. If we're going to have 3.25 modular nuclear reactors to say electrify the railroad, one or some number for Northwest Energy, then some number to provide the electricity for electrolyzing water to make hydrogen, which is very electricity intensive. We probably have as many as 10 nuclear plants in a very short time, and so we need to find where to put the waste. I just can't kick it down the road like everybody else. We have 390,000 metric tons of high-level nuclear waste on the surface of the earth right now. The very first nuclear waste repository being commissioned in the world's history is in Finland this summer at Olkiluoto. You can follow it. And they are going to do the waste from 5 plants for the lifetime of those plants. We need to be thinking probably about 10 plants for the lifetime of those plants. And I'm thinking probably where the Boulder Batholith, where the mines of Butte have been located. It's a huge formation. It underlies about 1.5 million acres of Beaverhead Deer Lodge National Forest. We should look at that to put something down there. The way the one in Finland's working is it's 1,500 feet deep. It's just an underground mine, 1,500 feet deep with radial tunnels going out. Then they package the waste in copper. They put it in a thing, then fill it with bentonite, back it out, and say goodbye to it for 100,000 years. But we need to start working on that in the open, because if you read the books available on what happened with nuclear waste in the past, it was always a break in public trust.
Yeah.
And so I'm just telling people straight out, that's what I think we need to do.
Now, in order to generate a lot of electricity, we need a lot of water, and we'll continue to need that, right? And where's it coming from?
Well, Montana's it's west of the 100th meridian, and we are very arid. And so the small modular reactor that's going in down in Kimmerer, Wyoming with Pacific Corp, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission's got that on a fast track, and the idea is to get the first one done and then be able to make cookie cutters of it. I've put in a request for information during the comment period 2 weeks ago for, I want to know what's the footprint for 1, what's the footprint for 5, maybe 10, how much space do these things take? And then I noticed early on, even though those reactors aren't supposed to use water for cooling, which is great, to make it suitable for out here, they did put in for some water from the Naughton Reservoir, probably for their boilers. So we need to know about that, because we are very limited in our water. If you look around, even the industrial water rights that are available, say from the sugar factory in Sydney, or what used to be the smelter up in Great Falls. I mean, they use quite a bit of water, but even that would be used up in no time at all. So I think we should keep our water for our fish and our people, and then use seawater. And I noticed with the Department of Reclamation that has the dams and markets the power, federal power, they have a desalinization project they've been funding for the last couple of years at $7 million a year. And I would like to see us get a piece of that up in Montana so we can learn more about how to take seawater, make it available to make hydrogen, and then return the brine to the ocean. That's my thinking.
Well, I like your future focus and what can we do now to prepare many years down the road. And I think what's important to note is that as we become less dependent on oil and coal, we need to use those coal and oil cars, and we'll bring seawater here and we'll desalinate it and turn it into hydrogen.
I first looked at the Northern Tier Pipeline. The Northern Tier Pipeline has been approved. It goes right from Puget Sound to Montana, anywhere. But it would bring, it's a 48-inch pipeline. It would bring a lot of water, and I'm just not convinced that the oil industry, when I start working with them, if I get elected, that they're going to be at all interested to that degree. I mean, if they were, that'd be great. But I think it's more realistic to think of repurposing rail cars.
That's great. Now, we're kind of drawn to a close on our second show. We'll have to do a third show on topics here, but let's do the rest of the show with firefighting. We have volunteer firefighters in Montana, and they need volunteers, but you were a smoke jumper twice, a hot shot, and you're very positive about our firefighters and how important they are. I think right now, nationally, there's 29,000 guys on fires. What's the future of our volunteer firefighters?
It's really very important, because that initial attack, the first people on the fire with whatever they bring, they make all the difference. And then whoever throws in to help them out. And these fires are pretty dicey. And like we've got volunteer fire departments all around Helena, and Helena could easily burn up if the fires aren't controlled. So I'm anxious to make sure that the volunteer firemen are trained, and that they have enough of them so that when somebody's on vacation or can't leave their job because they can't get paid when they go on a fire or whatever, There's other volunteers to fill in behind that person. But that's going to require people feeling more compelled to do that kind of work. It's basically just volunteer work. And we don't have the money to pay. There's not enough money anywhere to pay them for all that they do. So that feeling of community service, which kind of, I think, is behind why a lot of people are in the Guard too, public service, really, we need to really encourage that and reward that and recognize that, because if those volunteer firemen aren't out there trained and ready to go, we're going to be in big trouble. So my thinking is to take what's already there and appreciate it, and then encourage more volunteer firemen. And I know it pays off with the cost of insurance on houses and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, well, fires are going throughout Montana and the nation right now. And I was on Type 2 incident management teams and with our county DES people. And when we had the McDonald Pass fire, we were very concerned about Helena burning up. So that's a real possibility in Montana, no matter what town you're in. And we need the people who know how to put out fires. That's a profession. They need to be trained in them. And we don't have the people turning out. What kind of incentives what we might do to get people to do that?
I've been really investigating that as I go across the state. I've talked to fire department chiefs, and then volunteer fire department members and chiefs, and it's really a very complex system. It's got a lot of moving parts. The DNRC is a big part of it. The Department of Natural Resources Conservation, and of course there's these agreements between the federal agencies about who's going to do what, and then the ground is just a patchwork of ownership and so forth. But I think in the end, paying people is good. I was initial attack a lot, and it's hard work, and it's dangerous work, truthfully. But in the end, getting paid is not the important thing. It's the person with the heart to really go after it. And you can see on a fire, and you see somebody putting a line up a hill, and you see a group going, and some do good and some are kind of lackadaisical. Well, on a fire, you can't be lackadaisical. And so I really, we should find ways to reimburse, like right now DNRC reimburses for equipment, trucks, but not with people on them. Well, maybe we could figure a way to reimburse trucks with people on them. And somehow get those first couple hours on the fire reimbursed, so that helps encourage the volunteers. So, but in the end, that heart is really important, you know.
And the community involvement too. Well, we've drawn to a close on our second show so quickly here. There's so much more to talk about. But if you'd like to be a volunteer firefighter, call up your local fire department, and they will put you in touch. They'll teach you how to fight fire, how to be safe. They'll even teach you how to be an EMT, so you can help, well, your community. But I took EMT training and I use that on myself, and family members. So it's really good. We'll continue discussing more topics with John in our next segment. Again, he's running to be your representative for the Western Montana District number 2. Eastern, that's right, the Eastern District number 2. Congressman for a 2-year term. And I hope that through this show and our talking about these different topics, you can say, yeah, I like that idea, and I'd like this person to vote for him. So we'll see you on the next show.